Apologies that it doesn't require hordes of video essays and analyses to be appreciated. How dare it be accessible without a semester's worth of required reading and other people's praise for it to hold up. Look back to the list of characters I rattled off in the intro to this video. Sure, some of those are more deep characters like your Jigsaws, your Pyramid Heads, and your Frankensteins, but other ones there like Freddy Krueger, Chucky, and Slender Man? Do you think they appeal to audiences because of their analytical depth? But perhaps the biggest reason people might mock the Slendrina series is because it's quite child-friendly. It's the same thing you hear about stuff like Five Nights at Freddy's and so on. But I have a question here. What's wrong with being child-friendly? I recently put up a poll on my YouTube community page asking people when they got into horror media. As expected for my demographics and the general demographics of horror YouTube, the majority of people got into horror in the 2010s, but there were people on either side of that window. So for people before the 2010s, would you dismiss things like Goosebumps? Are You Afraid of the Dark? Scooby-Doo? Courage the Cowardly Dog? The Trapdoor? Coraline? Monster House? Doctor Who? Point-and-click horror games on Newgrounds and Miniclip? I would certainly hope not, because yeah, these things can be silly and they're far from the intensity of horror in more adult media, and you can laugh at them for that, as I had in this video towards Slendrina. But to be actively critical or dismissive towards these things, it is just misguided and ignorant, or in the case of many content creators, straight up malicious. But I'll talk about that later. And for newer horror fans, if you don't see that many, but not all, popular analog horror series have an age-agnostic appeal, and therefore a very large young audience, then those jokes I made earlier about turning Slendrina into an analog horror villain were aimed specifically at you. Sorry. To be able to create effective and accessible horror media that is fit for children without crossing any lines or being exploitative is a real talent, and that's never a quality we should mock media for. But this isn't where my praise for Slendrina ends in this regard, because look at the progression from the first game to the last. Game by game, Deviloper added in new from the first game to the last. Game by game, Deviloper added in new mechanics, new types of scares, new enemy varieties, new uses of space and sound. Gradually it became more and more complex until it eventually was what I consider to be more intricate than most other indie horror experiences on the market today. And it was a well-implemented, well-paced, and still child-friendly progression, with no barrier to entry whatsoever. To the point where I would say that playing all 10 games in order is one of, if not the best tutorials for modern horror gaming that you could hope for. And I'm being entirely serious. The next natural step would be something like Penumbra Overture. It would be a nearly seamless transition, and to be honest, Overture really only adds physics interactions and menu navigation into the mix, which not all games have. And again, I know I keep bringing it up, but it is important. All of these games were made for mobile. That is astounding to me. And another great thing to see here is how Deviloper himself progressed as well. You can see where he tried things out, you can see where he experimented, you can see where he found things that didn't quite work. And he did all of this while maintaining a consistent brand and tone. So with all of that said, why don't people treat this series or any similar ones with respect? Because it's hard. Not the games, they're all pretty straightforward, but talking about the games. Earnestly. We've bred such a cynical atmosphere around gaming, and especially anything that could be deemed as entry-level or for a younger audience. And what this is translated